Hi guys, welcome to the next video of the RESTful tutorial series. In this video, we'll look into @produces annotation. This annotation is used to specify the my media types or representations a resource can produce. So basically you can say that this annotation is used to specify the content type of the response a resource can produce. Let's check this with a small example. Let's create one method getUserId which will return a string. In this method, we are trying to extract one URI path param user ID from the request URL and returning the same to the client as a plain text. Now since we are returning a plain text, so in @produces annotation, media type should be text underscore plain. If we don't give any @produces annotation, then by default the data is returned in text HTML format. Now let's check the client code for the same. In the client code, we are trying to hit that web service URL, passing it the username. We are extracting it from the request object. And then using HTTP get request method, we are calling that web service, getting the response in client response object, and then getting the body of the response using get entity method, and then printing that response. Now build the projects now and test this out. Let's run this JSP. This we already saw in my previous video. We had created one JSP and this hits the client servlet, and in the client servlet we are writing the client code to hit the web service. So we'll run this JSP on the server In this JSP we have two input texts, one username, one email. This username is going in the web service URI parameter here, and in the web service code we are extracting this URI parameter and then returning the same to the client. Okay, so we are able to successfully hit that web service method, and we are able to extract that value as well, the Ratnesh, and the same thing has been returned to the client. So we are able to get that value correctly in the client also. Output is Ratnesh. Now this was a simple example using the text. Now suppose we want to return XML to the client instead of returning a text. For this, what we'll do, we'll create one user object using the user ID and an email which was in the JSP. So we'll have one more parameter here for email. Let's create this class. In this class we'll have two fields, user ID and email. Generate getters and setters for these two. Now let's change the client code. We have to add one parameter here for email. Okay, so both the parameters are being sent to the web service URL, and in the web service code we are using those parameters, user ID and email, to create one user object and returning the user object from the method. Now in @produces annotation, we need to specify that we want to return the data in the XML format. Now build both the projects. See what is coming in the log. So here we are getting one exception. It's saying that there is no message body writer for Java class user and MIME type application XML. So what happens whenever we return an object from our resource method and put annotation produces annotation to specify the content type to be returned to the client. So what Jersey does, it invokes one of its message body writer objects which converts this user object to the content type which we specified in the @produces annotation. In this case, what is happening? It is not able to find the message body writer which will convert our user object to XML. For this, what we need to do, we need to annotate our user class with JAXB annotation. Then Jersey is able to find the message body writer which will convert our object to the XML. Let's annotate the user class with JAXB annotation. We just need to put one XML root element annotation here. So using this annotation, the message body writer will convert the user object to XML. The root element will be user and the sub elements will be user ID and email. Okay, now let's build this project. Now we will see what we get in the log. Okay, so now we got the output which you can see is in XML format. User is the root element, email and user ID are sub elements. Now similar way we can produce JSON format also. The same JAXB annotation will be used to convert our user object to the JSON format. We have to just specify that in @produces annotation here that we want the data in JSON format. taking a lot of time in building the project. Okay, now let's hit this. So we are able to get the data in JSON format. Email is this and user ID is this. A couple of more points which we should note down regarding @produces annotation. So let's discuss those points. Now the type which we are trying to return or produce using @produces annotation should be actually acceptable by the client. If the client is not accepting the media type which we are trying to return, then an unacceptable media type error is thrown. So if our method is producing JSON but client is accepting only XML, then that error will be thrown. But how it actually finds out whether this type is acceptable or not? For this, they use the accept header parameter, which is coming from the client in the HTTP request header. We can set this accept header parameter by calling the accept method on the web resource object here. Okay, so now the client is accepting only XML, but our web service method is returning JSON data. Now let's build this and check what is happening. This is the output which we got, and here you can see we got an error 406 and not acceptable. It's like media type not acceptable. Now in @produces annotation we can put multiple types also. So we can put here JSON as well as XML. So we are specifying that the method can produce both XML or JSON, either of these two, depending on which is more acceptable by the client. In our case, client is accepting XML. So what will happen? This user object will be converted to XML and then sent back to the client. Let's test this out. Okay, so we got the data in XML format now. Yeah. Now To get the data in JSON format, we have to just change the client code to accept JSON. Then Jersey will convert this user object to JSON instead of XML. Let's test this out. Okay, so we got the data in JSON format. So here what we are trying to do is we are trying to give multiple options that the data can be converted to JSON or it can be converted to XML depending on whichever is acceptable by the client, and Jersey will convert this object to the appropriate type. There is one more scenario where multiple methods have the same URI and HTTP request methods. Then which method should be invoked by the Jersey? Let's have one more method, similar method. So we'll copy this, change the name to user ID 1. So both the methods are responding to the same URI and at the rate get annotation. So which method should be invoked when we call it from the client code like this? Which method should be invoked? What we'll do here, let this method to return JSON format, and this will return XML format. Okay, now it's the Jersey's responsibility to choose one of these two methods. Now how does it actually choose? For that it uses this @produces annotation. Now the client is accepting JSON format, so it calls the method which is actually producing JSON here, get user ID. So if we'll test this out, we'll get this log. Let's check this. Okay, so it went into the get user ID method and is returning JSON format. Now if we change the client code to accept XML, then it will invoke the get user ID method, get user ID 1 method, because it is returning application XML. Let's test this. Okay, so now it is invoking get user ID method and the output is coming in the XML format. So sometimes this @produces annotation is also used to choose the appropriate method. Now this is it for the @produces annotation. We'll see @consumes annotation in the next video, so keep watching.